Hi everyone. Here I'm going to share the notes for the module number 1 that it covers chapter 6 and chapter 7. Again, some of you maybe are a little confused, all right? But what you have to do only in this module, I mean, something that you have to do or assignment you must do is the learning curves in a chip for chapter 6 and 7, homework number 1 on a chip, submit the assignment, yeah, I mean the assignment of the quiz, the upload the activity of the quiz. For those, you already have videos, all right, on Blackboard if you want to watch them. And do the quiz number 1, a short quiz that is also on Blackboard. That's all what you have to do, right? You don't have to do anything else or nothing assigned, nothing else assigned for this week. Now, so that you can do the homework number 1 on a chip, you can be able to use these notes, right? I will try to make the notes in this kind of notes. So I will explain. I will give you an overview for the chapter. Well, for the module because this module covers 2 chapters, and then I will try to do some exercises. All right, and the ones that you're going to see on the homework. I will do that because I don't want the video to be very long. Yeah. All right. So first on Blackboard, in the course, and I posted some handouts, right? Handouts for chapter 6 and handouts for chapter 7. And there you have handout for chapter 6. Let me open it here. There you have. This is a summary of the main concepts of this chapter and for which we have to pay attention, right? If you want to use this handout so as a summary of the contents of the chapter, that's okay. I will explain the main concepts here. And then notice how at the end we have some exercises. Exercise number 1, exercise number 2. Those are based on the exercises from homework number 1 on Achieve. All right, first, let me write here some notes. Chapter number 6, samples and observational studies. If you check the handout, it says observational study observes individuals and measures variable of interest, but does not attempt to influence the responses. Random access experiments deliberately imposes some treatments, so we can say treatment here is a variable, on individuals in order to record their responses. The purpose of this kind of experiment is to study whether the treatment causes changes in the response. So in any statistical study, we have mainly 2 kinds of studies. Any statistical study is, in general, either observational, study, or a randomized experiment. We can say it in general this for any kind of a study in statistics. Of course, there are more kind of studies, but we can say those are classification or those are derived by, I mean, from these two, observational or random experiment. Now, here we can identify mainly two kind of variables, even when there could be more in any observational study or random experiment. We have the explanatory variable and response variable. So based on this, any study will have at least two variables. Explanatory variable and response variable. So at least we're going to have those two. Now, we continue reading this handout. Besides the explanatory variable and response variable, we can have another kind of variables, or actually we can have studies where we have more than one explanatory variable. We can have two or three or more, but sometimes we have another kind of variables for which we are not interested in them. For example, this one, lurking variables. When there are many more variables than the ones we record, and some of those may affect our response variable. Related to this is the concept of confounding. Two variables, either explanatory or lurking variable, are confounded when their effects on our response variable cannot be distinguished from each other. All right. For example, let's say that I want to carry out a study. We want to design one study to test whether the masks are effective to reduce the spread of COVID. Are masks effective to reduce the spread of COVID? Well, I know that should be the SARS-CoV-2, right? The virus is called SARS-CoV-2, but the disease is COVID. But to simplify this, I will say only COVID. So here we can identify all the concepts here. First, what kind of study should be this? Observational or random access experiment? Well, that depends. We can try to do the two kind of studies. So we write here, this study can be either observational or randomized. What is the difference? Well, observational, as I have mentioned before, in the observational studies, we only observe, we do not manipulate anything. And in a random access experiment, we try to control the explanatory variables or explanatory variable only to see to influence the response variable and see whether we have cause and effect. That is the main difference, right? The main problem with the observational studies is that we don't have, it's very difficult or almost impossible to deduce cause and effect only due to that study. But in this case, for any study where we want to test or to prove the if masks are effective or not to reduce the spread of COVID, if you check in the internet in the real life, we have both kind of studies, observational and random experiments, to test whether the masks are effective to reduce the spread of COVID. So this study can be either observational or randomized. Now, explanatory variable. Explanatory variable would be what? Would be mass. Response variable would be spread of COVID. Just like that. Now, but let's say that we only do an observational study with this, all right? If we perform an observational study, well, and even it's going to be the same with the random experiment, but with the random experiment, we can control that more. If we have only an observational study, what can be a possible lurking variable? A lurking variable, again, is when there are many more variables than the ones we record, and some of those may affect our response variable. So lurking variable is a variable that is there, but you are not interested in that variable. But anyway, maybe it's affecting your response variable. For example, here, what could be lurking variable? Lurking variables, we can have, for example, immunity. Yeah, because maybe if a person already has immunity, yeah, maybe that person is not going to spread the COVID as if that person does not have immunity, right? So maybe one person say, "Oh, I was wearing my mask all the time and I didn't spread the COVID, and I was infected." Well, maybe you already have immunity. Maybe that reduces your chances. I mean, to spread the COVID. Besides immunity, we can say seasonality. Depending on the season, maybe the spread of COVID is going to be faster than in other season, right? Maybe, for example, with the flu, we know that for the flu, when is the spread occurring faster for the flu? Well, usually it's occurring between December and March. That okay? So in this case, for the COVID, this would be lurking variables. Maybe they are affecting these variables. Maybe they are affecting the response variable. Yeah, but we are not interested in this variable. How can we reduce the effect of this variable? Well, maybe with a random experiment. Now, so the concept of confounding two variables, either explanatory or lurking variables, are confounded when their effects on a response variable cannot be distinguished. So in this case, we can say, for example, the variable mask and immunity in this kind of in this kind of study, they are confounded because we can it's hard to distinguish the effects of those in the response variable. In this study, mass and immunity I'm sorry, in this study, mass and immunity are confounded. Confounded. Why? Because again, it's hard to distinguish the effects of these two on the response variable. There you have. So now these other concepts, population, in a statistical study, the entire group of individuals about we want information. All right, this is something that we're going to use later, the concept of population sample. But I think that I'm pretty sure that most of you have heard about this concept before. Sample is the part of the population from which we actually collect information. Sample design describes exactly how a sample is chosen from the population. Now, a key concept here, bias. The design of the study is biased if it systematically favors certain outcomes. Sample survey is an observational study that relies on a random sample drawn from the entire population of interest at one point at a time. Sample surveys essentially is a poll, right? Essentially, the most common example of a sample survey is going to be a poll only. Now, case control study. In a case control observational study, case subjects are selected based on a defined outcome, and a control group of subjects is selected separately to serve as a baseline with which the case group is compared. One example of this, all right, give me a second. I have some images that I would like to share with you. All right, I took this example of a case control study from the internet. For example, here, abstract, we evaluated effectiveness of personal protective measures against severe SARS-CoV-2. Our case control study included 211 cases. Cases were defined as asymptomatic contacts of COVID-19, patients who later tested positive for SARS-CoV-2. And here, in any case control study, we have something called cases, and the other one is the control, something for which we are going to compare. Controls were asymptomatic contacts who never tested positive. Wearing masks all the time during contact was independently associated with the lower risk of SARS-CoV-2. And here we can see the conclusions for this study. In this case control study in Thailand of 211 cases and 139 controls, the authors found that wearing masks all the time during contact was independently associated with a 77% reduced risk of SARS-CoV-2 infection compared with not wearing masks. The authors also found the type of mask was not independently associated with infection. And here's some important conclusion. Our findings support consistent wearing of masks, hand washing, and social distancing to protect against COVID-19. So this is evidence in favor that this study says or gives evidence in favor that the masks, they work, right, to reduce the spread of COVID. But let's not forget that this was an observational study. But of course, it's good evidence. All right. Now, let me do the exercises. All right. Again, these exercises in the handout are taken from the exercises in the homework from Achieve. That okay? In the homework from Achieve. So every time that I create video notes like this one, or when we have a handout, I will try to include examples or exercises, the exercises from the homework and Achieve, right? So that you can have an idea about how to respond them. In this case, it's only theory, but anyway, I think it's important to include them also. All right, so here, it's simple. Classify each description as either an observational study or an experiment. It says, number one, a scientist seeks to test the ability of a new globe to retain heat. The globe is randomly placed on one hand of each participant, and an older model of the same product is placed on the other hand. So in this case, let me do it here. I will write here exercise number one, handout, chapter 6. So I'm going to put only the key. For the number one, the first one, this is going to be an experiment. Number one, experiment. Yeah, because we are kind of imposing here some of the variables to the participants. So on the key, how can I know? How do you know that something is an experiment? For sure, if you see this word randomly, yeah, randomly, for sure, we're talking about a random experiment. Number two, a political scientist seeks to determine if women between the ages of 25 and 30 are more likely than men of the same age to vote for a Democratic candidate. The scientist selects a sample of voters from this age group to survey their political preference. This is going to be what? Observational. Number two, observational. Yeah, any kind of survey or poll, most of the times or in general, I don't know any other case where this is not the case, always going to be an observational study. Okay? The third one, Agriculture scientists seek to test the effects of a new pesticide on corn crops. Half of the participating farmers are assigned to new pesticide, and the other half continue using alternative pesticides. The crops are compared after 2 seasons. So in this case, because the farmers are assigned into two groups, so right, it doesn't say randomly, but half of the participant farmers are assigned to new pesticide and the other half continue using an alternative pesticide. We can say here that this is an experiment. Number 10, the next one, students from 10 schools are divided into groups by researchers, those that participate in musical activities and those that do not. The student grades are monitored for a year to determine if those who participate in musical activities achieve higher grades. Oh, well, in this case, even when we divide the participants into two groups, right, we are only observing. So in this case, it's going to be an observational, right? And there you have. Let's see the exercise number 2. All right, for the exercise number 2, this is again taken from the exercises from the homework one on a chip. I didn't put what this is asking for, but anyway, here we have to specify kind of study. So first, before I read, exercise number 2, kind of study. What kind of study this? It says a study examined a large nationally representative sample of American adults aged 18 to 64 years. The primary outcome of interest was body mass index, which was also used to categorize participants as obese or not obese. In the study, inadequate hydration was associated with higher BMI and obesity. The published findings include this statement. Although inadequate intake of water among obese adults may explain the observed findings, differential consumption of food with higher water content may also contribute to the relationship between inadequate hydration and elevated BMI. So in this case, what kind of study this? Observational. Then we have to specify the variables measured. Variables measured. And if you see, they are BMI and the was associated with higher the primary outcome of interest was body mass index. The body mass index is one of them, and the other one is this one. Urine, I'm sorry, osmolality, this one. BMI and osmolality. There you have. And then it said that we have to specify at least a Lerkin variable. A lurking variable that could affect the response variable here, beside the BMI, is what? For example, can be consumption of food. Consumption of food. There you have. Okay, so you're going to see in the homework number 1 this kind of exercises. I think they are not complicated. Anyway, if you have any question, remember you can let me know. All right, I'm going to stop this video here, right? This was not supposed to be very long, right? So I will include the chapter 7 for the module 1 in another video. See you later.